Hey everybody, Mestre Vibes coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. Very special episode today, episode 34, Mestre Vibes. Today I have a very special guest with me, a good friend of mine who is an ordained Buddhist monk here in Japan. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but today he's come by because he wanted to interview me, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for you guys to hear a little bit about me being interviewed. So guys, Mestre Vibes, I'm going to turn it over to Gavin and let him talk a little bit, and then he can start his interview. Welcome today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mestre Vibes, and giving me this opportunity to interview today. I'm really looking forward to it. So a little bit about me. I started Zen training in Seattle in 2014 and trained there for about 5 years, and decided I wanted to ordain and become a monk in order to kind of preserve this training, this lineage, and offer it to the next generation. And to do so, I became a priest here in Japan and entered a training monastery where I trained for 3 years. And after that, I've been working at a temple in Sendai in the Tohoku area. And today, I've returned down to Tokyo to interview you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I've been wanting to do something like this, but I just thought it sounded really weird to interview myself. So it's a little less intimidating if somebody else does it, because I don't feel like it's, kind of strange or even fake or whatever. So I wanted to do something like this, and I'm really glad you're here. So let's jump into it.
All right. Well, starting off, can you tell me a little bit just about yourself, your story, briefly, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Well, most of my people here, especially on the podcast, know that I grew up in South San Diego. A single Mexican mother who came over from Mexico, and 4 of us. And we had, like everybody at that level, had different challenges. Growing up, though, I realized very early on that I had a lot of blessings in my life, and mostly being, although I come from a very heavy influenced Mexican culture, especially because we grew up so next to the border, I realized how lucky I was being born in the United States and all the opportunities that had. Even at a young age, I knew, everybody was saying, go to college, and I did, and that really helped a lot. Eventually, I got a job with a company that took me around the world for about 5 years. I decided to stop doing that and finally settled in Japan. I came here in 1999. I planned to stay for a couple of years, and then later, here I am, 23 years later, married, kids, fantastic students, and a fantastic academia.
Great. And at some point, you encountered capoeira somewhere, somehow, and then really got into it, decided this is going to be something you want to pursue for the rest of your life. Can you kind of walk me through how you encountered capoeira and where things took off from there?
I think this is kind of funny because it's kind of similar to your story, but the opposite. So when I was a kid, I grew up and at the local YMCAs and the community centers, they always had martial arts classes, and I was always into martial arts. And I did taekwondo, karate, a little bit of kung fu, whoever was teaching at that time, there was something to do. And I realized, I really like martial arts, but I also grew up with a very heavy influence of dance. A lot of people don't know is that my mom was a really accomplished dancer, flamenco and salsa and different things like that. Growing up, I was always heavily influenced by Mexican artistic culture. And when I was a kid, we did Aztec dance and all these different things in the different elementary school events and whatnot. And when I encountered capoeira at the age of 17, it just shocked me. Wow, a martial art, but with a Latin American cultural identity that I could really relate to. I mean, call it what you want, but capoeira is that ghetto Latino culture, and for me it was just it's just my cousins, it's just me, the way I grew up. So it really connected, and as I started to study Portuguese, I studied through the lyrics of capoeira. And I think that's one of the reasons that my vocabulary in Portuguese for a lot of the older masters and Brazilian masters and masters, they connect with me more because I speak in that language. I can speak proper Portuguese, and I've delivered, interviews at PhD level in Portuguese, but when I speak about capoeira, I can speak in that genre that's very few, even Brazilian masters know how to speak. And as I studied all those lyrics and everything, I started to understand capoeira as a very spiritual philosophy. And that's what really took hold of me. And once I decided not to work in a traditional 9-to-5 job, I decided, okay, I'm going to do capoeira, and this will be like my spiritual, philosophical path in life. So for me, capoeira is 90% movement and 90% philosophy and culture. So that's something I really enjoy doing, and that's what really connected me with capoeira. And 35 years later, here I am.
So you encountered capoeira first in San Diego?
No, Mexico City.
Oh, in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you start doing classes right away, or you just kind of...
No. Back then, it was really, really like all over the place. I know capoeira, this is way before the movie Only the Strong. This is way before, like anything like that. So I was in Mexico City, and during the summer, and I want to say 87, or I can't even remember now, it's been so long. But 80, maybe 89. No, 88, 80. I can't remember, it's been so long. But I went down, my uncle had a friend who was an importer of Brazilian coffee. And he was from Bahia. And he knew some people who, like 3 or 4 workers, like from different areas there who lived in Mexico City, who played a little bit of capoeira, and they would get together once in a while. But it was a very, I can almost feel like that was like the last level of that old school street Angola style. Like when I went and the energy and everything hit me, I just connected forever. It's like I always tell people capoeira and my wife love at first sight, and here we are, right? After that, I traveled to Brazil. I studied. I have 2 master's degrees, one in Latin American studies from San Diego State, and my whole focus was Afro-Latino or Afro-Bahian culture. And my second one at Waseda, which is international relations, focusing on the importation and globalization of popular Brazilian culture, music, dance, and art.
And you eventually found your way to Brazil too, and spent half a year?
A while, because it's weird, because it's on and off.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I don't know if you remember when we were in college, you could get like grants to go like for abroad for like 6 months, 3 months, summer. And at that time, being a young minority, it was easier to get grants from me, I think. I don't know, because I wasn't the one giving them out, but I could save money. When a lot of people were having fun when I was younger, I was saving so that I could travel back and forth to Brazil.
And so you got to Brazil. Where did you mostly study or practice capoeira?
Okay. I really, back then, it was really hard to find a capoeira school. It's not like after capoeira became popular, after Only the Strong, and it became globally accepted, which today is a very, how can I put this? It's a very, it's part of the UNESCO now, right? It's considered a world treasure culture, right? It wasn't always like that. And a lot of the people back then who were involved with it for several different reasons didn't want anyone to know. And it wasn't because it was illegal, it was still because it was looked down upon. So the different people I studied with, you gotta remember, I was 17, 18. I was also trying just to survive. My main job was doing like tutoring in English because there was nobody. I mean, back then in Bahia, and the only kids were like rich kids. Like no one else could afford it. I was young, dumb, and just like no idea. So I trained under a couple of people, and I just trained, and I'd go to Roda a lot. And that was really things. I used to always really love going to Afro-Brazilian dance and the samba reggae. Something about Afro-Brazilian culture just felt right for me.
So when you were there, it wasn't just mainly focused on capoeira, but you were also getting
it was a life experience, right? It's like you come here maybe to Japan to train karate, but you're not doing it like 24 hours a day, right? I mean, some people can, but I was enjoying life. When I talk to like Mestre Vibes and we talk about back then, that generation, he just starts laughing because he says the stuff you did, no one, that's like ghetto Brazilians. Well, at the time, I didn't know. And I was ghetto Mexican, so going to Brazil, and it wasn't like a big cultural change for me. It was just, everybody was a little darker. Nobody was really like, oh, this guy's different way of doing it. Nah, he's like my Mexican cousin. He's just as ghetto. And then I went back to the States, and once I really started focusing on college, I just really focused. I got my undergraduate was a double major in political science and at the time they called it Hispanic Latin American Studies. And then after that, I just kept going, right? And just, I always found somebody who was doing capoeira or samba. I was in Korea when I first went there in 93 or 94, I can't remember, but like, I was at a bar. It was one of the first Latino bars in Korea, in Seoul. I started sambaing, and the guy comes up to me and goes, oh, capoeira, blah, 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 like samba, do you know capoeira? I'm Brazilian, and we just hit it off. And he was a guy who played cavaquinho. And actually, I've posted the picture where we're doing a show for their fashion week back then. So if I can find that picture, I'll send it to you. So
great. All right. So you're doing capoeira here and there. You also mentioned you were in the military for...
I was never in the military.
Not in the military.
I'd worked a little bit, and that's something that I really try to put way behind me. It's part of my life that like I thought I was going to follow a different path, and it was very, very stressful path at the time. You hear about a lot of things now, but like about how difficult it is for minorities. And without getting into a big without getting into a big conversation about American, minority relations, I'd rather not even get into it because it has nothing to do with who I am now and how I do things. Because back then I had a lot of baggage.
Well, then this is a good transition. So you said you were kind of on a different path.
Yeah.
So then at what point did you kind of see capoeira as the path that you want to follow?
So when I was in Seoul, Korea the second time, I lived in the countryside for about a year, and I practiced by myself and I trained a lot, but there was really nothing in my head about teaching capoeira yet. And then when I went to Seoul on my off days and whatnot, I really just started, like, oh, I'm going to go to the park, and somebody goes, oh, I have a friend who does taekwondo and he's interested in capoeira. And I had a group of about 8 students, and we were training capoeira together in like the university, outdoors, whatever. So it was a really good experience, and I guess that kind of caught me. And when I went back to the States, and I was like, okay, you know what? The more I started doing capoeira, when I finished all of my classes at San Diego State University, I really had to make a choice. Do I want to go on to the PhD route and do the traditional, academic or whatever my career would be in the United States? Or do I want to go abroad? And I really realized that, like, at that time, I wanted to still have more international experience. A friend of mine said, hey, come to Japan. You're going to have a lot of opportunity. There's like, you can do some workshops, you can do some shows and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up coming to Japan, and I mean, the rest is just history from there, right? So it was kind of like, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to teach capoeira. It was more like I kind of started going that way, and I didn't really resist it. And I ended up just because it matched me.
Yeah. And you said when you had the opportunity to kind of teach these guys in Korea, it caught you. Can you go into a little bit the difference between training capoeira and teaching capoeira?
It's completely different. Like, teaching for me has always been a really high respect. Like, even when I was a kid, I hear stories even now, like, when people disrespect teachers and whatnot, I'm just like, I just can't imagine. There have been a lot of teachers that I've had that I didn't like, but just, I don't know, maybe it's my upbringing, whatever, Latin American, Mexican upbringing at the time, but you don't disrespect the teacher. At the same time, I thought I always had a teacher should have a really high regard for themselves and for the respect for the profession. And for me, teaching, people don't generally notice, but while I was doing my master's degrees, they teach courses on how to teach. I have graduate level teaching understanding. And sometimes my people such as yourself will say, you do it so effortlessly, what you do in your life, that it doesn't seem like it's that much work. It's not that. It's that I've organized it. I've professionalized it. A lot of times I'll make a very distinct comparison or a distinction in the difference between a professional capoeira teacher and someone teaching capoeira. When you're practicing capoeira, you have no obligation to anyone. No, not obligation, but no, you don't have to care about anybody. You can show up, and I've talked about in my second book, Capoeira Fire, the difference between a client, a student, and a disciple of capoeira. And when you're training by yourself, you can just be selfish. It's easy, and a lot of people are. I see it. You can't say it because you're a teacher, right? But then there's the teaching, and are you teaching because I see a lot of people teaching because they want attention and they want the status of a teacher, and it's built on ego. And people might say, "Oh, you think too much about it." Well, don't you think about your own job? I mean, this is what I do, and mostly because I want to make sure I don't go down that path. I've never taught capoeira because I wanted attention. I did shows and enjoyed the attention, but I never had that need of it. And I think it's because I've done so much in my life that I don't need affirmation, or I'm not that insecure where I need people to tell me, "Oh, sensei, kakui,"
This is a kind of good point I want to get into too. A lot of capoeira teachers, that's not their main thing. They do their job and then they teach a couple times a week or something, but at some point you decided this is going to be everything I do. Capoeira is going to be my full-time thing. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what's the difference between having your whole thing be capoeira or just your side thing?
I think a lot of it really, unfortunately, comes down to self-awareness and education. Brazilians, okay, this is, I know maybe I'm going to get a little bit, I don't really care. When I talk to old school, older Brazilians who are doing capoeira, or like my Uncle Francis the other day, when I talk to Mestre Boagente, when I talk to Mestre Acordeon, this is not to toot my own horn, but they always bring up at the last minute, I forget that you're not Brazilian. Because the way I operate and the way I flow through that professional, as having become a professional capoeira master, also as the way I present myself, I know how I'm acting in the community. And it's really important that I make this decision. I am not Brazilian, but 99.9% of the masters and the community I deal with at my level or higher are Brazilian. Lack of education. Every Brazilian comes up and has they have a dream of opening their own academia and becoming a famous, rich capoeira teacher. But none of them have any idea what that means. What it takes, organization. It's very rare. It's not all, but very rare. And that's why most of them do what you say, because they can't live from capoeira because they're not professional capoeira teachers. Yes, it was a struggle. Yes, I suffered a lot. My wife, my kids struggled a lot. But long term, it was worth it for me, and I wouldn't change anything. To teach capoeira professionally, you have to treat it as a professional job. Most people don't. They treat it as a supplementary income, something they love or whatever, you know what I mean? But they're not treating it as a professional job. if you were starting your own hot dog stand and you're like, oh, today I don't feel like going, or today I'm not going to show up on time to my thing. Oh, I forgot to pay for the license. Oh, I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that. Then you're not going to be successful. If you want to do it part-time and you have another income to pay for that, then you can just hang out doing barbecue all weekend. And that's how I look at it. You have to have some understanding. When I say education, I don't mean like formal education, but one thing that I really, really focus on and that I hope I can do a lot more is mentorship. Telling people, not telling people, say, guys, if you want to get to here, you got to do this. Like it or not, but 99% of the time, people will ask advice and never follow up. And then I realized when my MBA teachers used to say, don't give advice, it's too tiring. And I was like, wow. But I'm positive about things, so I hope that in the future, more and more teachers will become professional. I think it also has to do with, for example, I know a couple of professional teachers in America that only work from Capoeira, but they also get grants, and that's part of it. You have to go with where you can make the money to survive. And define your success, define what you want to do. You want to teach Capoeira every day? Are you ready to teach Capoeira every day? Are you ready to go through all the trials and tribulations of organization, of emailing, of doing the money side? It's a lot. There's a whole side of Capoeira no one ever sees. Like when people walk into the Academia and they're like, oh, hey, man, oh, that's a nice new pandero. They have no idea that I had to send email to Brazil. I had to order. I had to invest. I had to, wait for it to come. I had to put it together. There's all these extra things that nobody thinks about. And that's what I think most people don't think. They think it's just showing up. I'm the good capoeira guy or girl, and I'm going to be famous. Give me money. And that's the main difference. It's actually a job.
So you're saying, besides it's not just for the normal teacher. You come in, you teach class, but you're saying outside of that, there's all the business aspects of, like you said, doing a hot dog stand. You gotta think of paying your rent, supplies, all these other things that doesn't usually come into your frame of mind. But also, you're doing a lot of other stuff besides just capoeira. It's Brazilian culture related, but you do maculele, you do Afro-Brazilian dance, you make CDs, you write books, you've done a master's on Brazilian studies. Do you think that is also important, or necessary if you're going to make your whole thing capoeira?
No, I think it's just like, I'm an artistically creative person. I consider myself a rudimentary intellectual. I'll do my best what I can. And the stuff I do now is because I've reached a level of what I can define as my success. There were times where I had to run out and teach English for 1 year because there wasn't enough money at the Academia. We had 2 Academias, Mestre Linguiça, and my wife and I, and we had to close down during the earthquake because nobody came.
In 2011.
We had the restaurant. Everything I do comes from capoeira, comes from Brazilian culture, from what I do. So I want to be really careful. When I was starting with capoeira, every single person I knew who did capoeira in Brazil, nobody just did capoeira. It doesn't exist. That's why for me, you're a wannabe capoeirista if you only do capoeira. And let me explain that. I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, because we would, before and after class, what did you just teleported to class and started training? You would hang out at the bars. You would hang out. You would dance full hole with your classmates because back then people didn't have a lot of money. So, there was 1 berimbau, 2 berimbaus, and a couple of panderos at the Academia, and that's it. Nobody had anything. So you listen to the music being played outside on the passing trucks or whatever, and people would dance samba. There was so much involved in the capoeira lifestyle, which is 90% capoeira, but 10% very strong in everything else. We do shows one time with Brazilian dancers, and I love, my wife always laughs because I'll be doing lambada. And she's like, well, people are like, how do you know lambada? How do you do salsa? Because it wasn't just Even though I was raised in an artistic environment, it wasn't just, you just do capoeira. You're doing other things. Like, okay, we got a maculele show, everybody be ready. You're always on time, especially back then. Like, if I could make a little extra from doing shows, it helped a lot at that time, right? So who can do maculele? If you can't, you can't. You're not going to get paid. So there was that dynamic, and that's why I think a lot of times people say, well, Brazilians are so good at capoeiras, because in Brazil, it's a chance to make a career, make money, to get out of poverty. So it's like being a professional boxer from the poorest echelons of society. It's really challenging, and that doesn't really happen outside of Brazil. So you don't see people like, okay, I'm going to be the best, and then they're going to fight through the crucible of fire in the roda. And I saw that as a young person, and sometimes I got burnt, but generally I didn't have to be in it. I had that choice as a foreigner, which now I reflect on and realize, like, I was really lucky. I could always say, whoa, that's crazy. But at the same time, you're going to lose respect within the thing. So there's things you have to do and things you don't do over long periods of time in capoeira that define who you are. And this is one of the reasons that, like, I feel I'm really lucky with a lot of relationships I have in capoeira.
So your crucible of fire. Let's get into this. What challenges, either in Brazil or here, kind of starting your capoeira life in Japan, have you encountered that you could share with us?
I think the funniest thing that's probably you're going to laugh at is that for the first 10 years of capoeira, like, I was talking to a really good friend, a mestre who's been a mestre from Bahia forever. And I don't like to name drop because some people might not feel comfortable having their names involved. So that's why I don't use a lot of names. I don't want people uncomfortable for my observations. And he said, he goes, when I was interviewing him, he's one of the people I interviewed for my second book, one of the mestres, and he had said that, he goes, the problem with capoeira today is not foreigners, it's the Brazilians. It's a Brazilian mestre, right, who's been doing it for like 40 years. And he said the lack of education, discipline, everyone only plays in the roda, there's no good music, they have no understanding of capoeira ritual or rites. They just, they want to get on their Instagram and blow up. They want a foreign person to come marry them and take them out of Brazil. That's a job. That's a career in capoeira. But same in samba or whatever, you know what I mean? It's a way, and I understand that. And the ability. This takes us back to talking about teaching capoeira and the difference. To teach capoeira is to care about other people, their growth. And if you don't have a strong, solid capoeira spirituality, we talk a lot about this. Maybe next time we'll talk about Gavin's experience in the Buddhist temple community, because I lived it with him by internet, by proxy, for 5 years. So if you don't have a good, solid base in spirituality, then you're going to be teaching emptiness, and not in the spiritual Buddhist way, but like like, I see a lot of people learning capoeira and they have so little understanding of what they're doing, and that's a lot of it because of YouTube. And especially, I'm talking about Asia mostly because that's what I live here in Asia with so few Brazilians. I always talk about that. There's no Brazilians in Asia. And if they are in Japan, they're Japanese descent, and they're very rarely involved in capoeira. So it's very little compared. And I'm saying that because compared to like the United States or Europe, where it's flooded. So we get a lot of people teaching capoeira but not really understanding what they're doing. And like I said, it goes back to mentorship. I'm trying to do what I can. I'm not saying I know everything, but I'm trying to be as aware as possible.
So during your journey here in Japan, did you ever have kind of any doubts, like, maybe this isn't the path for me. Maybe I should be doing something else?
No.
And all right. Well,
no. The second I decided to continue capoeira is the same thing. Like when I met my wife, I'll love you forever. That's it. I'm done. I'm not gonna ever stop doing capoeira. I love it. I'm rehabbing right now some injuries. I'm training. Got new music. You said, I'm doing books because this is my life. My blood literally flows with capoeira energy. With the energy, like my papai Damion, Mestre Damion is an incredible Sama. He calls me his whitest little black boy. he's Afro-Brazilian, so we'll let him do what he wants. Also, he's 80, so he can say what he wants. And he always says, the blood of the Orishas flow through you and through our energy and through our culture. He's a very spiritual person, so I feel it. People talk about Ashe, but I honestly feel it. I love it, and it guides me in everything I do every day, and how I move forward in life.
You're kind of already answering the next question I want to ask you, but I wanted to get into, a lot of people ask Mestres, what is capoeira? But more than that, we can give a basic kind of description of capoeira, but probably most people listening to this know. I want to know, what does capoeira do for you personally? You said it kind of feeds you spiritually, it guides you. Is there anything else, or do you want to go deeper into that?
Well, generally, in life, we all have different paths we choose to get to, let's say, a healthy point in life. For me, capoeira answers all those questions. It checks all those boxes. It touches on my artistic, musical, dance expressiveness. It guides me when I'm tired in a philosophical and spiritual way. When I listen to old capoeira songs or something, it really hits me. And I'm like, wow, it's like, somebody reading, maybe for them it's reading the Bible, or somebody reading the Quran, or somebody reading, some text on Zen Buddhism. But the capoeira music, it hits me. The importance of community. Capoeira, you cannot play alone. And that's why I always joke about the so many people doing Instagram, TikTok by themselves, doing capoeira. Honestly, the Instagram of people doing solos is probably the most uninteresting thing for me. Except for maybe a couple ideas, okay, today I'll do this in class. But it's almost become like breakdance. If you look at 99% of the videos on Instagram about capoeira, there's no connection between the person. They're just nervous looking at the camera doing their sequencia, their combination. Where's that energy? Capoeira is about that connection. About Contramestre Cobrinha asked me the other day, can two people play capoeira disconnected? And I said, he asked, I think he was a little bit, taking the teasing me a little bit, but there's no point. When I see people not listening to the music, then what's the point of the music? If people don't know what they're singing, then what's the point of singing? You could be cat meowing if it sounds nice, and it would be the same. Right now, we're working on some new music, and Mestre Linguista is working on Ladainha in Japanese. Maybe we won't use it in the roda, but it's an artistic expression from our capoeira passion, and hopefully that'll hit people here in Japan who don't understand Portuguese. Brazilians constantly talk about you have to learn Portuguese to really enjoy capoeira. No, they have to learn to speak their languages that they're communicating in more to communicate what they need to communicate. It's not a one-way path. Yeah, it would be great if you can do Portuguese, but after 35 years, I've met few people who actually can sit down with mestres in the middle of the night and talk about capoeira, because they don't have that language of capoeira. For example, you can sit with old monks and talk about your subject because you guys are all well versed in it. It's the same in capoeira. I meet a lot of people who are not well versed in capoeira. They're well versed in Portuguese, and that's very different.
So capoeira provides you with some community, is a strong part of capoeira. Connection, not only with other people, but with yourself, with music, with maybe the universe, who knows, and gives you kind of a vocabulary to talk about capoeira on a deeper level. Is there anything else in there that you think capoeira provides for you or gives to you? Or
Capoeira is based on what I will talk from an academic point of view, on Latin American fatalism. Hoje tem, amanhã não. Today we have, tomorrow we don't. Most Capoeira traditional music is about hardships, slavery, post-slavery, downtrodden, but none of them talk about giving up. I can't think of any songs in Capoeira that talk about giving up. You get a rasteira, you get a sweep, you get up, and you move forward. I will never in my life understand people who say life is too hard. Growing up, going to Mexico, going to Brazil, and seeing real poverty, I'm blessed. I've had the luckiest life to come from where I come from, going on to graduate school, going on to travel the world, speaking 4 or 5 languages throughout my life. I've had an amazing life, and I've appreciated every moment of it. I appreciate it a lot more now that I'm older, but I'm blessed, and I cannot complain. If someone said, so when I was at grad school at Waseda, I tell people I took the master's course in entrepreneurial theory, and the first thing my teacher said, define what success is for you. I don't want to get into that because it's a big thing, but if we're defining what success is for yourself, and I know what success is for me, then I would say I'm the most successful capoeira teacher in the world. Because happiness, confidence, good relationship with my wife, my kids, my friends. I'm waiting for new kids to come today. I'm waiting for like my babies. We had marshmallows on Friday yesterday. If I had to say I'm happy, I'll say I never stopped to think about it. If you have to stop me for a second and say, do you have anything to complain about? No. Just not enough time in one day. I'm blessed. So capoeira for me, if success is defined how I define it, then I'm super successful.
All right. Well, you got a lot of projects going on. You've accomplished so much in this time you've been here in Japan. Looking forward, is there anything you're kind of excited about? Any projects or goals that you're looking forward to?
Well, the next year will be our first full year post-corona here in Japan, post-COVID. So everything's starting to come back. And honestly, I really love to move and shake. And there's so many things that I'm planning for next year, especially with my community. We were talking about living from capoeira. And one thing is a lot of times, a lot of capoeira teachers think traveling and doing a lot of things is success. That is, if that's your job. But if you're going to run an academia, you really need to focus on your academia. My main is here. So all I do right now is Capoeira Academia here and my Patreon. Yeah, we have a couple of groups of Capoeira Zoador in Korea and Thailand and somebody I work with a lot in Taiwan in the fitness industry. But you can't do everything every day. If you're going to leave your academia, then students are going to leave. So you have to have a good setup. If you can get to a point where people can do that, like my really good friend Mestre Batata in LA, that guy he's like me, he lives at this academia basically. He doesn't live there, but he lives there because his job is capoeira. That's what I do. But you got to have that commitment and understanding. And when you're here, if you have nothing to do, it's like a painter. You're painting, let's say one of those little booths in Bahia. If you have nothing to do and you have an empty space, then you need to paint something of capoeira, put it there because maybe somebody will buy it. It's that ghetto hustle with education and self-awareness that'll take you forward. And commitment.
All right. For people kind of considering or maybe who are already on this path of being a capoeira teacher, do you have any advice for them?
Study. I get people who come here from 15 years of capoeira and can't play pandero, and always that fit. Yeah, well, some kind of excuse. The one reason that I'm so happy to be where I am in life is because no one can tell me I'm wrong. They can say there's an alternative. But you can't, like, I chased after everything. We say in Portuguese, você tem que correr atrás. You have to chase after it. And everyone now waits for everything to be given, and that's a customer, a student. But I'm a disciple of Capoeira. I chase after everything. I constantly do new things. I'm working on a new album right now. I'm thinking about my third book. All of these things with the new tools such as AI, such as new artwork, new everything you can do. Not to do is just lack of laziness, is lack of vision or lazy. I know it sounds a little tough, and not everybody's the same. Sorry, I don't make excuses for myself. And people who do, I've cut all the toxic people in my life out over 5-6 years ago, and that really helped me get through Corona in a very positive way. So mentally, I'm super comfortable in moving forward for 2024.
So for people looking forward to being successful, study, go out there, do what you need to do, find what you need to find.
Don't show up, be present.
You know, you mentioned earlier to me when you came to Japan, you had a lot of you were so lucky to encounter these amazing mentors who taught you about music.
Music especially.
So I don't know, for me personally too, I found in my ventures, when you really decide to do something, somehow magically, the universe comes and gives you the tools that you need to accomplish it, or the ways, or things open up.
It's that old school, right? When the disciple is ready, the master appears. But I think it's always there. Just when you decide to do something, it's like the game when we were kids. When you're in the car, you say, okay, if you see a Mercedes-Benz, say Benz, you know, on a long drive, or Volkswagen, whatever, and when you're thinking about it, you see it more. But as I learned in entrepreneurial theory, you got to be ready to seize the opportunity. And most people aren't. You might think you're ready, but being ready and thinking you're ready is completely different. You're not going to say, now we were talking last night about how AI is going to, you can write your own app. But the guys I was talking to are specialists in technology, and they're like, it just doesn't work that way. You can't clout chase in Capoeira. It'll come back at you, because at the end of the day, who are you?
Oh, well, end of the day, who are you? That's a big question. So not only do you got to be looking out for the opportunities, but you got to be looking in too.
Yeah.
And figure out who the hell you are,
yeah,
what you're about.
You really got to put the work in. You really got to have one thing that I realized, that if you don't have an undying passion, people will realize that. People can eventually see through fake. And I think that's what hits a lot of Capoeira teachers. They're raised to show that they're dedicated, and they've brainwashed themselves to think they're dedicated. But if you are dedicated, then you will act it in accordance to that dedication. Not, flimsy, unprofessional, right? So those kind of things. You need to be very dedicated, so people see that you're dedicated to it.
Do you have any advice for for you? Were you on the fence somewhere? How did you find the place where, like, yes, this is it?
In what way? This is it in what way?
You want to be all in Capoeira. Like, I know you said it just kind of fell into place and you kind of went with the flow.
I talked about this in my first book, The Path of Capoeira. Like, my father had passed away and had gone through a lot of emotional negativity and self-imposed toxicity. And I woke up one morning and listened to a song of Capoeira, and it hit me like revelations. It hit me like nothing had ever hit me in my life before, cold sweat. And I felt like the hand of the Orishas touched me, and they were like, you need to get up. And since then, I was okay. I looked inwards and said, okay, I'm gonna focus and do everything I can for Capoeira and what I do. And from then, I haven't looked back. And that included chasing my wife. It all came together.
Well, great. That's been a wonderful conversation today. Let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your advice, your history, your knowledge, your expertise. Really appreciate everything you do.
I appreciate having you here because sometimes it's important. Like I wanna say things that are necessary, but the setting and the comfortability to say it is very important. Thank you for creating that environment. Gavin is planning on working on a couple more YouTube project, possibly a podcast, and we're thinking about some ideas that we might put out there soon. So as always, I hope you guys will support what I do and what he does, because we're just trying to enlighten ourselves and anyone along the way we can. Gavin, thank you so much for being here today on Mestre Vibes podcast, and let's see what we can do next.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, guys, Mestre Sukuri coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. Mestre Vibes. Have a great day. Lots of love, lots of peace, and lots of capoeira.